Most people think a mother's love is unconditional. I learned the truth when I was 16, bleeding out on a hospital gurney in Charleston. I had been in a terrible car accident during a storm. The metal had crushed my legs, and the surgeon told the staff I had less than an hour to live without emergency surgery. They needed permission. They needed a parent. So, they rushed to call my mother, Melanie. She didn't scream. She didn't ask which hospital. She was at a spa with my half-sister, and she was just annoyed that the phone rang. The nurse put it on speaker, and the whole room heard her say the words that still echo in my head. "If she doesn't make it, just call me later. We're in the middle of a treatment and I'm not signing anything." She thought I was already gone. She thought no one would care, but she was wrong. The nurse recorded that call. And that recording didn't just prove she was a monster. It was the thing that finally set me free. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? To understand why my mother left me to die on a roadside, you have to understand who I was to her before the accident. I wasn't a daughter. I was a reminder of a life she wanted to forget. My father died of leukemia when I was 6 years old. I don't remember much about the sickness. I mostly remember the quiet. I remember the way he used to smell like sawdust and peppermint, and how he would lift me up to touch the ceiling of our small porch in West Ashley. He was a carpenter, a simple man with rough hands and a laugh that shook his whole chest. He loved my mother, Melanie, with a desperation that even a 6-year-old could feel was heavy. But when he died, he didn't just leave a hole in the house. He took all the warmth with him. The funeral was the first time I felt the coldness start. My mother stood by the grave in a black dress that looked too expensive for us. She didn't hold my hand. She held a handkerchief, dabbing at dry eyes. I stood next to her, clutching a stuffed bear my dad had built for me, feeling small and terrified. The only person who held me that day was my grandfather, Walter Kane. He was my dad's father. He was a retired police chief, a big man who looked like he was carved out of oak. He smelled like the ocean and old tobacco. He picked me up when they lowered the casket, pressing my face into his shoulder so I wouldn't have to watch. "I've got you, baby girl," he whispered. "Grandpa's here." For the first year, it was just Mom and me, but it wasn't a partnership. It was a burden for her. She looked at me and saw bills she couldn't pay. She looked at me and saw a man who was dead. I tried to be good. I tried to be quiet. I learned how to make my own peanut butter sandwiches and how to walk on the floorboards that didn't squeak. I learned to be invisible because when I was visible, I annoyed her. Then, she met Gordon Reeves. Gordon was everything my father wasn't. He was a property developer who drove a silver Mercedes and wore suits without ties. He had a loud voice and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He met my mother at a bank where she was working as a teller. 6 months later, we were moving out of the small house in West Ashley and into a sprawling, white-columned estate on James Island. It felt like walking into a museum. Everything was white and beige. We weren't allowed to sit on certain chairs. We weren't allowed to wear shoes on the carpet. Gordon wasn't mean to me exactly. He just didn't acknowledge me. I was like a piece of furniture that came with a wife, something he had to tolerate but didn't have to like. Then, Harper was born. I was 8 when my half-sister arrived. And that was the moment I truly became a ghost. Harper was a beautiful baby. She had Gordon's blue eyes and my mother's blonde hair. From the second she came home from the hospital, the house changed. The silence was replaced with cooing and lullabies. My mother, who never had time to braid my hair or check my homework, suddenly had all the time in the world for Harper. I watched from the doorway as they took family photos. Mom, Gordon, and the baby. The photographer would look at me, confused, and Gordon would wave his hand dismissively. "Just us 3 for this one," he would say. "We want to focus on the new arrival." They never called me back in for the next shot. As we grew up, the gap became a canyon. Harper was the princess. I was the servant. When Harper was 5, she wanted a pony. Gordon bought her a pony. When I was 10 and needed braces, Mom sighed and said we'd have to wait because cash flow was tight, even though there was a new Range Rover in the driveway. I stopped bringing my report cards home. I stopped inviting friends over. I realized early on that if I wanted to survive in that house, I had to need nothing. If I needed nothing, they couldn't say no to me. The erasure happened slowly. First, my pictures came down from the mantel to make room for Harper's dance recital portraits. Then, my trophies, small things from school spelling bees and track meets, were packed into boxes and put in the attic. "It just looks cluttered, Aubrey," Mom told me when I asked where they went. "We're going for a minimalist look." But the minimalist look didn't apply to Harper's participation medals, which were framed in gold and hung in the hallway. The final blow came when I turned 15. We lived in a massive house with 5 bedrooms. I had a room on the 2nd floor, down the hall from Harper. It wasn't huge, but it had a window seat I loved. One day, I came home from school to find boxes on my bed. My clothes were already packed. Harper needs a playroom, Mom said, not even looking up from her magazine. And a study space. She's starting advanced placement prep next year. Harper was 12, she didn't need a study space. Where am I going? I asked, my voice trembling. The room above the garage is perfectly fine, Gordon said, walking in. It's private. You'll like it, teenagers like privacy. The room above the garage was unfinished. It had one small window unit for AC that barely worked against the South Carolina heat. In the winter, it was freezing. The floor was concrete covered by a thin rug. It was separated from the main house. To get to the kitchen, I had to go outside and unlock the side door. They had physically moved me out of the family. I spent my nights out there, listening to the muffled sounds of their life inside the main house. I could hear the TV, the laughter, the clinking of dinner plates. I wasn't invited to dinner anymore. It wasn't explicitly said, "You can't eat with us." It was more subtle. They would just sit down at 6 p.m. without telling me. If I walked in, the conversation would stop. Gordon would clear his throat. Mom would look at my clothes and ask if I had finished my chores. I learned to eat sandwiches in my garage room. I learned to hoard granola bars. The only person who kept me tethered to the earth was Grandpa Walter. He saw it. He saw everything, but he knew he had no legal rights. Mom threatened him constantly. "If you cause a scene, Walter, you won't see her at all." So he played the game. He bit his tongue so he could stay in my life. Every weekend, I would escape to his house on the Ashley River. It was a small, brick ranch house that looked exactly like it did in the 1980s. It was messy and cluttered with fishing gear, but it was warm. "Come here, baby girl," he'd say when I walked through the door. He'd cook things that were bad for his heart. Fried shrimp, hush puppies, grits loaded with butter. We would sit on his back porch and watch the river move. He told me stories about his time on the police force, or stories about my dad. "Your daddy loved you more than air," he told me once, looking intense. "Don't you ever let them make you think you aren't worth loving, Aubrey. You hear me? You are gold. They just don't know how to count." I held onto those weekends like a lifeline, but coming back on Sunday nights was torture. Driving up the long driveway to the big white house, seeing the lights on, knowing I didn't belong there. I remember one specific Tuesday. I needed a signature for a field trip. It cost $50. I walked into the kitchen. Harper was sitting at the granite island, eating a fruit salad. Mom was looking at a catalog. "Mom," I asked. She sighed, "What, Aubrey? I'm busy. I need a signature for the biology trip and a check for $50. She slammed the catalog shut. $50? Do you think money grows on trees? You just ask and ask and ask. I haven't asked for anything in months, I said quietly. Don't talk back to me, she snapped. Ask your grandfather if it's so important. Gordon and I have expenses. Harper's dance tuition just went up. I looked at Harper. She smirked at me, a piece of melon on her fork. She was wearing a sweater that cost more than my entire wardrobe. It's okay, Mom, Harper said, her voice sugary fake. Maybe she can just work in the cafeteria to pay for it. Mom laughed. Maybe she should. I turned around and walked out. I walked out the side door, into the garage, and up the stairs to my freezing room. I didn't cry. I had stopped crying over them years ago. Tears require hope, and I didn't have any left. I just lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering how long I had to endure this. I was 16. 2 more years. That was my mantra. 2 more years and I could leave. I could disappear. I didn't know that I wouldn't even make it through the week. Easter in the Low Country is a big deal. The azaleas are in full bloom, shocking pink, and white against the green lawns. The air is thick with pollen and the smell of jasmine. For Grandpa Walter, Easter wasn't about church or bonnets. It was about the boil. Every year, Grandpa hosted a low country boil in his backyard. It was the one time of year my mother and Gordon tolerated coming to his house. They did it for appearances. In Charleston, you don't skip family holidays, even if you hate the family. It looks bad to the neighbors. That Sunday morning, the sky was a bruised purple color. The weathermen were calling for severe storms later in the evening, but the morning was hot and sticky. I woke up in my garage room and dressed carefully. Grandpa had bought me a dress. He had given it to me secretly the week before, wrapped in brown paper. Saw this in the window downtown, he'd said, looking bashful. The lady said yellow is good for hazel eyes. It was a beautiful dress. Simple, pale yellow cotton with little daisies embroidered on the hem. When I put it on, I felt pretty. For a few minutes, looking in the warped mirror on the back of my door, I didn't look like the poor relation. I looked like a regular teenage girl. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic to Grandpa's house early to help him set up. The car was another point of contention. It was 20 years old, rust eating the wheel wells. I had bought it with money I made bussing tables at a diner. A job Mom hated because she said it was low class. but she refused to give me gas money, so I had no choice. When I got to Grandpa's, he was already boiling the water in huge pots over propane burners in the yard. The smell of Old Bay seasoning hit me, spicy and salty. "Look at you," Grandpa beamed, wiping his hands on a rag. Like a ray of sunshine, he hugged me, lifting me off my feet. "Happy Easter, baby girl." "Happy Easter, Grandpa." I spent the next 2 hours helping him dump pounds of shrimp, corn on the cob, red potatoes, and sausage onto the newspaper-covered picnic tables. It was happy work. I poured sweet tea into mason jars. I set out the hot sauce. Then, the silver Mercedes pulled into the gravel driveway. The mood shifted instantly. The air felt heavier. Gordon got out first, wearing a pastel polo shirt and boat shoes. Then Mom, in a white linen dress and heels that sank into the grass. Then Harper. Harper was wearing a designer dress that probably cost $300. She looked perfect, polished. When she saw me, her eyes flicked up and down. "Cute dress, Aubrey," she said. "It looks vintage." She made the word vintage sound like garbage. "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice steady. Mom walked past me without saying hello. She went straight to Grandpa. "Walter, honestly, could you have picked a more humid day? My hair is going to frizz instantly." "Good to see you too, Melanie," Grandpa said, his voice tight. The party started. Neighbors came over. People were eating and laughing, peeling shrimp and drinking beer. I stayed close to Grandpa, or I busied myself cleaning up shells. I was the help. I was always the help. Around 2 p.m., I went into the kitchen to refill a pitcher of tea. The window above the sink looked out onto the side patio. I could hear voices. It was Mom, Gordon, and Harper. They were huddled together away from the rest of the party. "So when do we leave?" Harper asked, bouncing on her toes. "Flight leaves at 10 a.m. tomorrow," Gordon said, sounding excited. "First class, straight to Nassau." "I can't wait," Mom said. "I need this spa week. I am so done with all this stress." "And we're staying in the villa?" Harper asked. "The one with the private pool?" "Of course, Princess," Gordon said. "Only the best. It's going to be a perfect family week. Just the three of us." I froze, the pitcher of tea heavy in my hand. Just the three of us. They were going to the Bahamas, tomorrow. My spring break started tomorrow too. I had assumed I would just be working extra shifts at the diner, but hearing them plan a luxury vacation, a family vacation, without even telling me, hurt in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't that I wanted to go with them. I knew it would be miserable. It was the fact that I didn't even exist in their plans. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was nothing. "What about Aubrey?" Harper asked. She didn't sound concerned. She sounded curious, like she was asking what they were going to do with the dog. Mom laughed. It was a sharp, dismissive sound. "Oh, please, she has work or whatever she does. Besides, can you imagine her in Nassau? She'd just mope around and bring the mood down. She's so depressing lately. I don't want her ruining my relaxation." "True," Harper giggled. "She is a total downer." "We'll just tell her we're going on a business trip for Gordon," Mom said. "She doesn't need to know the details. She can stay at the house and watch the security system." I set the pitcher down on the counter. My hands were shaking. "She's so depressing. She'd bring the mood down." I walked out of the kitchen. I didn't go back to the patio. I went straight to Grandpa, who was manning the cooler. "Grandpa." He looked at me and his smile faded instantly. He saw my face. "What's wrong, baby girl? What happened?" "I have a headache," I lied. My voice sounded thin and brittle. "A really bad migraine. The heat is getting to me." He reached out and touched my forehead. His hand was rough and cool. "You do look pale. You want to go lay down in the back room?" "No," I said. "I just want to go home. I need to sleep." He looked at me, studying my eyes. I think he knew someone had said something. He glared over at where Mom was laughing with a neighbor. "Okay," he said softly. "You go home, get some rest. Text me when you get there, okay? Promise me." "I promise. Drive careful, Aubrey. The sky looks mean out there." "I will." I walked to my car. I didn't say goodbye to Mom. She didn't even notice I was leaving. I saw Harper glance at me as I got into my rusted Honda, but she just turned back to her father and laughed at something he said. I started the engine. It sputtered, then roared to life. I pulled out of the driveway, gravel crunching under my tires. I turned onto the main road, fighting back tears. I told myself I wouldn't cry. I was 16. I was used to this. But as I merged onto the highway, the tears came anyway. Hot, angry tears that blurred my vision. I turned the radio up to drown out the thoughts in my head. Just the three of us. She's a downer. She ruins everything. The sky above me was turning black. The wind was picking up, whipping the Spanish moss in the trees like ragged flags. A storm was coming. A bad one. But the storm inside my car felt worse. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and pressed the gas pedal. I just wanted to get to my garage room. I just wanted to be alone. I didn't know that I was driving straight into a nightmare. I didn't know that in 20 minutes, the silence I craved would become permanent. I didn't know that the next time I saw my mother, she would be deciding whether I lived or died. The first drops of rain hit the windshield. Heavy, hard. Like bullets. I gripped the steering wheel and drove on. The rain didn't just fall, it exploded against the windshield. Within 5 minutes of leaving Grandpa's driveway, I was driving through a gray curtain of water. I turned my wipers to the highest setting, but they couldn't keep up. The rhythm was frantic, slap slap, slap slap, like a heartbeat going too fast. I was on a -26, heading back toward James Island. The traffic had slowed to a crawl, but then, for some reason, it sped up again. I stayed in the right lane, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. My head was pounding, not from a migraine but from the crying. My eyes were puffy and stinging. I looked down for 1 second, just 1 second to check the speedometer. When I looked up, the world was white. A semi-truck in the lane next to me had hydroplaned. It jackknifed, the massive trailer swinging out like a scythe across the highway. I slammed on the brakes. My tires locked. I felt the car slide, that terrifying, weightless feeling where you know you have no control. I wasn't driving anymore. I was just a passenger in a metal box moving toward destruction. I didn't scream. I just thought, Grandpa is going to be mad I wrecked the car. Then, the impact. It sounded like a bomb going off. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded inward. The world spun violently, sky, asphalt, until everything slammed to a halt with a bone-jarring crunch. Silence. For a moment, there was just the sound of rain drumming on metal. Then, the pain hit. It wasn't an ache, it was a consuming fire. It started in my legs and shot up my spine. I tried to move, but I was pinned. The dashboard was crushed against my lap. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. I tasted copper, blood. Help, I whispered, but I couldn't hear my own voice. Sirens, red and blue lights flashing against the wet pavement, hands reaching through the shattered window. We got a trapped driver. Get the jaws, hurry. A man's face appeared, a paramedic. He looked terrified, but he forced a smile. Stay with me, honey. What's your name? Aubrey, I choked out. Okay, Aubrey, we're going to get you out. Keep your eyes on me. The next 20 minutes were a blur of noise, the grinding of the saw cutting the roof off, the shouting, the rain soaking my face. When they finally pulled me free, the pain was so intense that the world went black. I woke up in the trauma bay. The lights were blindingly bright. People were running everywhere. Nurses were cutting my yellow dress off my body. BP is crashing, someone yelled. Internal bleeding, we need to get her to the OR now. A tall doctor with gray hair leaned over me. Aubrey, can you hear me? You're in bad shape, we need to operate immediately. Is there a parent we can call? You're a minor, we need consent. Mom, I gasped. Melanie. A nurse grabbed my phone from my bag, which they had salvaged. She found the contact Mom and hit dial. She put it on speaker so the doctor could hear. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Finally, a voice answered, but it wasn't worried, it was annoyed. What? Mom said. There was soft, chiming music in the background, flutes and waterfalls. Mrs. Reeves, the nurse said, her voice urgent. This is Charleston General Trauma Center. Your daughter Aubrey has been in a severe car accident. She is critical. We need your consent for emergency surgery right now or she will die. There was a pause. I listened, my heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for her to scream, waiting for her to say, I'm coming. Are you serious? Mom said. She sounded like I had interrupted a dinner party. I am at the spa. We literally just started our body wraps. I can't leave. The trauma room went silent. The doctors and nurses froze, looking at the phone. Ma'am, the doctor said, leaning in. You don't understand, her legs are crushed. She has internal hemorrhage. If I don't operate in the next hour, she will not survive. Oh, stop being dramatic, Mom snapped. Aubrey always causes drama. She probably just broke a leg. Look, if she doesn't make it, just call me later. I'm not signing anything right now. I'm not ruining my pre-vacation relaxation for her attention-seeking. Mom, I whispered. Tears leaked out of my eyes, mixing with the blood. Then I heard Harper's voice in the background. Is that her? Let me see. The nurse, in a desperate attempt to show them the reality, switched the call to FaceTime. She held the phone up to my face. I saw them. They were in white robes, sitting in plush chairs with cucumbers on a tray next to them. They looked pampered and soft. I was lying on a gurney, covered in blood, my face swollen, tubes in my arms. Harper didn't look horrified. She didn't cry, she laughed. Oh my God, Harper said. She looks like a zombie. Then I saw her thumb move. Click, she took a screenshot. Harper, put that away, Mom sighed. Nurse, do not call me again until I'm done. Goodbye, the line went dead. The silence in the trauma room was heavier than the storm outside. The doctor looked at the phone, his face pale with rage. Record that, the doctor ordered the nurse. Tell me you recorded that call. System records all emergency consents, the nurse said, her voice shaking. We have it. Who else? The doctor asked me. He looked desperate. Aubrey, is there anyone else? Grandpa, I wheezed. Walter Kane. The nurse scrolled. She hit the button. He answered on the first ring. Aubrey, you okay, baby girl? Mr. Kane, the nurse said. This is the hospital. She didn't even finish the sentence. I'm 10 minutes out, Grandpa said. His voice was different, hard, cold, scary. Start the prep. I'm the grandfather. I'm coming. Do whatever you have to do to save her. We need a signature for consent, the doctor said. Legally, I was a police chief in this county for 30 years. Grandpa roared through the phone. You touch her, you fix her, and if anyone stops you, I'll arrest them myself. I am driving through the front door if I have to. The doctor nodded to the team. Good enough for me. Let's roll. They pushed my gurney toward the operating room doors. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia mask covered my face was the clock on the wall. It was 3:45 p.m. My mother was getting a mud wrap. My sister was posting my dying face on social media. And my grandfather was driving 90 miles an hour through a hurricane to save me. I closed my eyes and prayed I wouldn't wake up. The darkness didn't last forever. It broke apart slowly, replaced by the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a monitor. Pain was the first thing to return. It was a dull, heavy throb that seemed to live in my bones. I tried to move my legs, but I couldn't feel them. Panic surged in my chest, hot and fast. SHH, easy now. Easy, a hand covered mine. It was large, rough, and warm. I forced my eyes open. The light was dim. I was in a small room with glass walls. The ICU. Grandpa was sitting in a vinyl chair next to my bed. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning at the boil. He was wearing the same clothes, his fishing shirt and jeans, but they were rumpled and stained with coffee. His face was covered in gray stubble. Grandpa, my voice was a croak. My throat felt like sandpaper. I'm here, baby girl, he said, his voice cracked. He stood up and leaned over the rail, brushing hair off my forehead. I'm right here. Did I die? He chuckled, a wet, sad sound. Not on my watch. You gave us a scare, Aubrey, a hell of a scare. I looked down at my body. I was covered in blankets. There were casts on both legs, propped up on pillows. My left arm was in a sling. My legs? I asked. Broken, he said. Femur and tibia, but the doctor fixed 'em. You got some metal rods in there now. You're gonna be the bionic woman. I tried to smile, but then the memory hit me. The phone call. The spa music. Harper laughing. My chest tightened. The monitor started beeping faster. Beep, 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 beep. She didn't come, I whispered. Mom didn't come. Grandpa's face hardened. The softness vanished, replaced by the look of the police chief he used to be. No, he said. She didn't. She said let me die. I heard, Grandpa said. He squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. The nurses told me. They played the tape for the legal team. Legal team? Grandpa sat back down. He took a deep breath. Aubrey, you've been asleep for 2 days. A lot has happened. He reached into his bag and pulled out a stack of papers. While you were in surgery, Grandpa said, I called Daniel Price. I knew the name. Daniel Price was an old friend of Grandpa's. He was the meanest, most expensive shark of a lawyer in Charleston. He scared everyone. Daniel came down here that first night, Grandpa continued. He listened to the recording of that phone call. He saw the screenshot Harper posted. She posted it. I felt sick. She did, captioned it, finally some peace. Grandpa shook his head, disgust etched into his features. Daniel took that evidence to a judge at 2 a.m. Judge Morin. He held up the papers. This is an emergency order, he said. Melanie Lane has been removed as your guardian effective immediately, pending a full investigation into medical neglect and endangerment. I stared at the paper. It was full of legal words I didn't understand, but I saw my name, and I saw Grandpa's name. She's not my mom anymore. Legally, she's suspended, Grandpa said. She can't make decisions for you. She can't even come into this room. I put a guard at the door. He pointed to the glass sliding door. Outside, a uniformed officer, one of Grandpa's old buddies, was sitting on a stool, reading a newspaper. She tried to come yesterday, Grandpa said grimly. After the police contacted her to tell her she was being sued for the hospital bill. She came here. She came to yell at me, Grandpa said. She didn't ask about you. She just wanted to know why her credit cards were frozen. The officer escorted her out of the building. She isn't allowed within 500 feet of you. I started to cry. It wasn't sad crying. It was relief. It felt like a weight, heavy as a mountain, had been lifted off my chest. Thank you, I sobbed. Don't thank me, Grandpa said. I should have done this years ago. I should have taken you out of that house the day your daddy died. I'm sorry, Aubrey. I'm so sorry I left you there. He put his head down on the bed railing and wept. It was the first time I had ever seen my grandfather cry. I spent 18 days in that ICU. It was the hardest physical pain I had ever known. The physical therapy started on day 4. They made me sit up. I screamed. They made me dangle my legs. I threw up from the pain. But emotionally, it was the most peaceful time of my life. Grandpa never left. The nurses brought him a cot, but he barely used it. He slept in the chair. He read To Kill a Mockingbird to me out loud when I couldn't sleep. He told me stories about the suspects he used to chase in the 80s. The nurses loved him. They brought him extra coffee and donuts. They called him Chief, and they protected me. One afternoon, about a week in, I woke up to shouting in the hallway. "I am her mother, you cannot keep me out, I have rights." It was Mom. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the quiet hum of the hospital. I froze. My heart rate monitor spiked. Grandpa was asleep in the chair. He woke up instantly, eyes snapping open. He heard the voice and stood up, moving faster than a man of 70 should be able to move. He walked out of the room, closing the glass door behind him. I watched through the glass. Mom was standing at the nurse's station, wearing a silk blouse and sunglasses. She was pointing a finger at the head nurse. Gordon was behind her, looking embarrassed, checking his watch. Grandpa stepped into her path. He was a head taller than her. He didn't shout. He just crossed his arms and stood there like a wall. Mom started yelling at him. She waved her hands. She pointed at my room. Grandpa just shook his head. He pointed to the elevator. Then the officer who was guarding my door stood up. He walked over and placed a hand on his belt. He said something to Mom. Mom's face went pale. She looked at Grandpa, then at the officer, and then through the glass at me. I met her eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I didn't shrink. I just stared at her. I let her see the casts, the wires, the bruises. I let her see what her neglect looked like. She flinched. She actually flinched. She turned around, grabbed Gordon's arm, and marched toward the elevators. Grandpa watched them go. Then he turned back to the nurse, thanked her, and came back into the room. He sat down and picked up his book. "Trash took itself out," he said calmly. "Now where were we? Ah yes, Scout was just getting into a fight." I closed my eyes and listened to his voice. I was broken, hurting, and homeless. But for the first time, I knew I was safe. The 18 days passed. The swelling went down. The stitches came out. On the last day, Daniel Price came back. He was a sharp-looking man in a navy suit. He sat on the edge of my bed. "Aubrey," he said seriously, "we're filing a civil suit. We're going after them for everything. Medical costs, emotional distress, pain, and suffering. And we are petitioning for permanent termination of parental rights." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Grandpa said, taking my hand, "that if the judge agrees, she won't be your mother anymore. Not on paper, not anywhere. I will be your legal father. I will adopt you." I looked at Grandpa. "You want to adopt me? More than anything," he said. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it," Daniel smiled. "Get some rest, kid. You've got a fight ahead of you, but you're going to win." They discharged me the next morning. Grandpa helped me into a wheelchair. He wheeled me out into the bright Charleston sun. The storm was long gone. The sky was a brilliant, aching blue. I didn't look back at the hospital. I looked at Grandpa's truck. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Which home?" I asked automatically. He stopped the wheelchair. He crouched down so he was eye level with me. "My home," he said. "Our home, Folly Beach. You never have to go back to James Island again." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes again. "Okay," I said. "Let's go home." Going home wasn't simple. When you live in a stilt house on Folly Beach and you have 2 broken legs, nothing is simple. Grandpa pulled his truck into the driveway underneath the house. The air smelled different here. Saltier, heavier, cleaner than the air in James Island. It smelled like freedom. He had installed a mechanical chairlift on the back stairs while I was in the hospital. I stared at it, feeling a lump in my throat. He hadn't just visited me, he had been preparing for me. He had been building a life for me while I was sleeping. "Ready, baby girl?" he asked. He lifted me out of the truck like I weighed nothing. He settled me into the chairlift and rode up the stairs behind me. When we got inside, the house looked different. The clutter of fishing nets and old magazines was gone. The floors were swept clean. And then he showed me my room. It used to be his tackle room, full of rods and buckets. Now it was painted a soft, pale blue, the color of the morning sky. There were white curtains fluttering in the breeze from the open window. A brand new bed with fluffy pillows sat in the center. On the windowsill, a set of shell wind chimes tinkled softly. "I didn't know what kind of bedspread you liked." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking nervous. "So I got the white one. We can change it." "It's perfect," I said. "It's the most beautiful room I've ever seen." He helped me into the bed. I lay back, looking at the ceiling. There were no water stains, no draft from a garage door, just peace. The first few weeks were a blur of physical therapy and quiet evenings. But while my world was getting smaller and safer, the world outside was exploding for my mother and Harper. Grandpa didn't tell me everything at first. He wanted to protect me. But Daniel Price, the lawyer, came over for dinner one night about 3 weeks after I got home. He brought a file folder thick with papers. We sat at the kitchen table. I was in my wheelchair, eating the shrimp Creole Grandpa had made. "You should know what's happening, Aubrey," Daniel said. "You're the one they hurt. You deserve to see the consequences." He opened the file. The first thing was the divorce filing. "Gordon Reeves filed for divorce 4 days after the accident," Daniel said. "He cited irreconcilable differences, but the reality is simpler. He's a businessman. He realized your mother was a liability." The recording of the call hadn't just stayed in the hospital. In a small town like Charleston, rumors move faster than storms. The nurses talked. The doctors talked. People knew that Melanie Reeves had refused to save her dying daughter because she was at a spa. Gordon's partners didn't want to be associated with that kind of ugliness. So, he cut her loose. He kicked her out of the James Island mansion. "She's living in an apartment off Savannah Highway," Daniel said. "It's a 2-bedroom unit above a pawn shop. Gordon froze the joint accounts. She has no access to his money." I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pity, it was shock. My mother, who wouldn't be caught dead wearing last season's shoes, was living above a pawn shop. "And Harper?" I asked. Daniel pulled out a printout of an email. "Harper had an early acceptance to the College of Charleston," Daniel said. "And she was on the waitlist for Duke. But when she posted that photo of you, blood on your face, laughing at you, someone took a screenshot before she deleted it. It circulated." He slid the paper across the table. It was a letter from the admissions office. "Dear Miss Reeves, in light of recent social media activity that violates our code of conduct regarding dignity and respect, we are rescinding your offer of admission." "She lost her spot," Daniel said simply. "She's not going to college this fall. She's working at a retail store in the mall." I looked at Grandpa. He was calmly peeling a shrimp, his face unreadable. "Karma," Grandpa said, "has a way of finding people who think they're above it." "What about the house?" I asked. "The big house? Foreclosure," Daniel said. "Gordon is liquidating assets to pay for the divorce settlement and to distance himself. The bank is taking the house next month." I sat back in my wheelchair. The house where I had been a ghost, the house where I had slept above a garage, was gone. The family that had erased me was being erased. But knowing they were suffering didn't make my legs stop hurting. The physical recovery was brutal. 3 times a week, Grandpa drove me to the rehab center in Mount Pleasant. The therapists were kind but tough. They made me bend my knees when the metal rods felt like they were ripping through my skin. They made me put weight on bones that felt like glass. I cried during every session. I screamed sometimes. But every single time I looked up, Grandpa was there. He didn't sit in the waiting room reading magazines. He stood right by the parallel bars. "You got this, baby girl," he would say, his voice thick with emotion. "One more step, just one more. I'm right here. I'm not letting you fall." On the bad days, when the pain was so bad I wanted to quit, he would bribe me. "You do 10 more steps and we stop for milkshake on the way home," he'd say. "Chocolate malt, extra whipped cream." "I'm not 5, Grandpa," I'd grit out through my teeth, sweating from the effort. "I know," he'd smile. "But you still like chocolate." He was right. One afternoon, coming home from therapy, I saw my phone ringing. It was a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized it. It was my old home phone number. The landline Mom had kept. I stared at the screen. Incoming call. Grandpa looked over from the driver's seat. "Who is it?" "It's her," I said. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "You don't have to answer. You never have to talk to her again if you don't want to. That's the rule." I watched the phone ring. I thought about the spa. I thought about the garage room. I thought about the apartment above the pawn shop. I pressed the red button. Decline. Then I blocked the number. I looked out the window at the marsh passing by, the sun setting over the tall grass. "I'm hungry," I said. "Can we get that milkshake?" Grandpa grinned. "You bet." The day of the hearing was hot and muggy, typical for July in South Carolina. The courthouse was a massive stone building downtown, intimidating and cold. I was nervous. My hands were shaking as I adjusted the skirt of my dress. It was a navy blue dress Grandpa had bought me. It was modest and serious. I was still in the wheelchair, though I could walk short distances with a walker now. "You ready?" Grandpa asked as he parked the truck. He was wearing a suit, an old one, a bit tight in the shoulders, but he looked dignified. He had polished his shoes until they looked like mirrors. "I think so," I said. "Just tell the truth," he said. "That's all you have to do. The truth is your weapon today." We took the elevator up to the family court floor. The hallway smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. As we rounded the corner toward the courtroom, I saw them. Mom and Harper were sitting on a wooden bench. They looked diminished. That's the only word for it. Mom was wearing a gray suit that looked slightly wrinkled. Her hair, usually perfectly blown out, was pulled back in a tight, messy bun. She looked tired. There were lines around her mouth I had never noticed before. Harper was next to her, looking at her phone. She looked angry. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, like she didn't even care enough to dress up for court. When they saw us, Mom stood up. She took a step toward me. "Aubrey," she said. Her voice was high and wavering. She put a hand on her chest. "Oh my God, look at your legs. Honey, I've been so worried. Why didn't you answer my calls?" I stopped my wheelchair. Grandpa stood behind me, his hands on the handles like a shield. "Don't," Grandpa said. His voice was low like a growl. "Don't you dare talk to her. She's my daughter, Walter." Mom snapped, the old anger flaring up. "You can't keep her from me. This is ridiculous. I'm her mother." "You abdicated that title on Easter Sunday," Daniel Price said, stepping out from the conference room. He stood next to Grandpa. "Save it for the judge, Melanie." We went inside. The courtroom was small. There was no jury, just the judge's bench, 2 tables, and a few rows of seats. The judge was Honorable Celia Morin. I knew of her. She had a reputation for being tough on deadbeat dads. I wondered what she would think of a deadbeat mom. We took our places. Grandpa sat next to me. Daniel sat on the other side. Mom and her lawyer, a young, nervous-looking guy who looked like he was fresh out of law school, sat at the other table. Judge Morin walked in. We all stood or sat up straighter in my case. "We are here for the matter of guardianship regarding the minor, Aubrey Lane," the judge said. She adjusted her glasses and looked at the files. "I have reviewed the emergency petition. I see we have a request for permanent removal of custody from the mother, Melanie Reeves, and transfer to the grandfather, Walter Kane." She looked up. Her eyes were sharp. "Let's hear the evidence." Daniel stood up. He didn't make a long speech. He didn't pace around. He just walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor," he said, "I could tell you about the years of emotional neglect. I could tell you about Aubrey sleeping in a garage while her sister had a suite. But I think the most powerful testimony comes from Mrs. Reeves herself." He pulled out a USB drive and plugged it into the court's AV system. "This is a recording of the call made by the trauma surgeon at 3:45 p.m. on Easter Sunday. The surgeon was asking for consent to save Aubrey's life." He pressed play. The sound filled the room. It was loud. "If she doesn't make it, just call me later. We're in the middle of a treatment, and I'm not signing anything." Mom's voice echoed off the wood paneling. It sounded even colder in the quiet courtroom than it had in my memory. It sounded inhuman. I watched the judge. Judge Morin's face didn't move, but her eyes went wide. She slowly turned her head to look at Mom. Mom was staring at the table, her face bright red. She was twisting a ring on her finger. Daniel wasn't done. "And this," he said, clicking a button, "is the social media post made by Aubrey's sister, Harper, 3 minutes after that call." The screen on the wall lit up. It was the screenshot. My face swollen, bloody, and terrified. The caption, "Finally some peace." The comments below it from Harper's friends, "LOL. Savage." A gasp rippled through the back of the room where a court clerk was sitting. Judge Morin took her glasses off. She set them down on the bench with a loud clack. She looked at Harper, who was slouching in the front row. Harper shrank down in her seat, finally looking scared. "In 23 years on the bench," Judge Morin said, her voice icy, "I have seen parents beat their children. I have seen them starve them. But I have never, ever seen a parent simply discard a child like a piece of trash because they were interrupting a spa day." She turned to Mom's lawyer. "Counselor, do you have any defense for this?" The young lawyer stood up. He was sweating. "Your Honor, my client was. She was under a lot of stress. She didn't understand the severity of the injury. She thought it was a prank." "A prank?" The judge raised an eyebrow. The trauma surgeon identified himself. The nurse identified herself. And even if she thought it was a prank, her response was not, "Is she okay?" It was, "Call me later if she dies." The judge shook her head. "Stand up, Mrs. Reeves." Mom stood up. She was trembling. "You are a disgrace," Judge Morin said. She didn't yell. She said it calmly, which made it worse. "You have failed in the most basic duty of a human being, let alone a mother." Mom started to cry. "Please, Your Honor, I lost my husband. I lost my house. Don't take my daughter, she's all I have left." I felt a surge of anger. "She's all I have left." She meant she's the only person I have left to control. I looked at Daniel. He nodded at me. It was my turn. "Your Honor," I said. My voice was small but steady. "Yes, Aubrey." The judge looked at me, her expression softening instantly. "Can I say something? Please." I wheeled my chair forward slightly. I didn't look at the judge. I looked straight at my mother. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You threw me away. You threw me away when Dad died. You threw me away when you married Gordon. And you threw me away on the side of the road." Mom sobbed, covering her mouth. "I don't want your money," I said. "I know you don't have any now. I don't want an apology because I know you don't mean it. I just want to be left alone. I want to be with the only parent who ever actually showed up." I reached out and took Grandpa's hand. He squeezed it tight. I want to be a Kane, I said. I want to be Aubrey Kane. The room was silent for a long beat. Judge Morin picked up her gavel. The court finds Melanie Reeves unfit, she ruled. Temporary custody is granted to Walter Kane, effective immediately. Furthermore, I am issuing a permanent restraining order against Melanie Reeves and Harper Reeves regarding Aubrey Lane. You are not to contact her. You are not to go near her home or her school. If you do, you will go to jail. She slammed the gavel down. Bang. We will reconvene in 6 months to finalize the adoption, she said. But as far as I'm concerned, this is done. Mr. Kane, take your daughter home. Thank you, Your Honor, Grandpa said. His voice was thick with tears. We turned to leave. Mom lunged forward. Aubrey, please, the bailiff stepped in front of her. Back away, ma'am. I didn't look back. I wheeled myself down the center aisle, Grandpa walking beside me. We got into the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the sight of my mother crying in the hallway. Grandpa let out a long breath, like he had been holding it for 16 years. It's over, he said. It's over, I repeated. And for the first time since the crash, the pain in my legs felt bearable. Because I knew that when I healed, I would be walking toward a future that was actually mine. The months following the first hearing were the hardest of my life, but they were also the first time I felt truly alive. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was messy. Summer turned into autumn on Folly Beach. The humidity broke and the air turned crisp. I spent my days in physical therapy, learning how to trust my legs again. The metal rods in my bones ached when it rained, a constant reminder of the metal box I had been trapped in. Grandpa was my shadow. He didn't hover, but he was always there. When I woke up from nightmares about headlights and rain, he was in the kitchen making cocoa. When I got frustrated because I couldn't walk to the mailbox without a cane, he didn't tell me to get over it, like my mother would have. He just walked slower. We got nowhere to be, Aubrey, he'd say. Take your time. He cooked for me constantly. Shrimp and grits became our staple. He claimed the secret was the amount of butter. I knew the secret was that he made it with love. He modified the bathroom so I could shower safely. He bought a comfortable recliner for the living room so I could elevate my legs while we watched old Western movies. The silence from my mother and Harper was deafening, but it was a clean silence. It wasn't the tense, angry silence of my childhood home. It was the silence of peace. I didn't have to hide in a garage anymore. I didn't have to worry about taking up space. One evening in October, I managed to walk all the way down the stairs and onto the sand without my cane. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purples and oranges. Grandpa was fishing off the surf a few yards away. He turned and saw me standing there, balancing on my own 2 feet. He dropped his fishing rod in the sand. Look at you, he whispered, walking over. I walked, I said, grinning. No cane. He hugged me then, tight and safe. I knew you could do it. You're made of iron, baby girl. That night, we sat on the porch listening to the ocean. The final hearing is next month, Grandpa said quietly. Daniel says your mother isn't even fighting it anymore. She's broke, Aubrey. The legal fees drained her. She's agreed to sign over rights if we drop the suit for emotional damages. I looked at the moon reflecting on the water. Let her go, I said. I don't want her money, I just want her name off my birth certificate. You sure? I'm sure, I said. I'm done being a victim, I just want to be free. The final court date was in November. The air was cold, and I wore a thick wool coat over my dress. I walked into the courthouse on my own 2 legs. I had a slight limp, the doctors said I always would, but I was standing tall. The courtroom was the same, but the atmosphere was different. There was no tension this time, just a sense of finality. My mother wasn't there. Her lawyer was present to represent her, but she hadn't bothered to show up. Daniel told me she had moved to Atlanta to live with a distant cousin, trying to start over where no one knew what she had done. Harper was gone too, working at a retail counter in a mall 3 towns over. They were ghosts now. Judge Morin sat on the bench. She smiled when she saw me walk in without the wheelchair. Good morning, Miss Lane, she said, warmth in her voice. Or should I say, the future Miss Kane. Good morning, Your Honor, I said clearly. The proceedings were short. Daniel presented the paperwork. The agreement was simple. Melanie Reeves voluntarily terminated all parental rights. In exchange, we dropped the civil lawsuit for millions of dollars. It was a trade. My freedom for her financial safety. It was the best deal I ever made. Aubrey, Judge Morin said, do you understand that this legally severs your tie to your biological mother? You will have no claim to her estate, and she will have no claim to you. I understand, I said. And do you wish to be adopted by your grandfather, Walter Kane? I looked at Grandpa. He was gripping the table, his knuckles white, tears shining in his eyes. He looked at me with so much pride it almost knocked the wind out of me. Yes, I said. He's the only father I've ever known. Very well, the judge said. She signed the paper with a flourish. Petition granted. Congratulations, Mr. Kane, you have a daughter. She handed the file to the clerk. And the name change, she asked. Aubrey Kane, I said. So ordered. Grandpa turned to me. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into a hug right there in the middle of the courtroom. I buried my face in his jacket. He smelled like peppermint and Old Spice, just like my dad used to. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright autumn sun. Hungry? Grandpa asked, wiping his eyes. Starving, I said. Let's go get some shrimp, he said. I looked at my reflection in the glass door of the courthouse. I didn't see the broken girl from the garage anymore. I saw Aubrey Kane, and she looked happy. It has been 5 years since the accident. I am 21 now. My legs still ache when a storm is coming, a built-in barometer that reminds me of where I came from. But I don't mind the pain. It reminds me that I survived. I graduated college last week with a degree in psychology. I'm working as a trauma counselor in Mount Pleasant now. I work with teenagers, kids who have been forgotten, kids who feel like ghosts in their own homes. I tell them my story sometimes. I tell them that blood doesn't make a family. Love makes a family. Showing up makes a family. I still live on Folly Beach with Grandpa. He's getting older now, a little slower, but his laugh is still loud enough to scare the seagulls. He still calls me baby girl every morning when he pours my coffee. Our house is full of life. It's not a pristine museum like the mansion on James Island was. It's messy. There are books everywhere, half-finished puzzles on the table, and sand by the door. But it's warm. Mom and Harper are distant memories. I heard through the grapevine that Mom is working as a receptionist in Georgia, and Harper is married to a guy she met at a bar, living a small life. I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them anything. I simply don't think about them. They taught me a valuable lesson, though. They taught me that you can't buy love, and you can't demand respect. You have to earn it. Yesterday, Grandpa and I were sitting on the back deck, watching the shrimp boats come in. You happy, Aubrey? He asked me, out of the blue. I took a sip of my tea and looked at him. The man who saved my life. The man who drove through a hurricane for me. The man who signed the papers when everyone else walked away. Yeah, Grandpa, I said. I'm happy. He smiled and patted my hand. Good, that's all your daddy ever wanted. I looked out at the ocean, vast and endless. I used to think I was alone in the world. I used to think I was trash. Now I know the truth. I wasn't thrown away. I was just being moved to where I belonged. Family isn't whose DNA you carry, it's who holds your hand when the world goes dark. And in the little house on the edge of the water, I found the only family I ever needed.